Good evening, everybody. We are going from chapter 291. Although it's a little further back from where we've been going for the last few weeks, we've been sometimes skipping a little bit forward, so we're coming back a little to keep up. Chapter 291 is the law of the meals on Shabbat. The Shulchan Aruch says that you must be careful to have, in other words, you must make sure to have 3 meals. The third meal in particular. These the first 2 meals a person would normally have. Friday night dinner, you're going to have dinner on Friday night. Shabbat day, I'm going to call it brunch. The truth is, you see from the Shulchan Aruch that they didn't daven any later on Shabbat. They used to daven at the regular time of sunrise, basically whenever it's called at 7 o'clock. So you'd be home 9:30, 10 o'clock, and that's when you would eat. So it wouldn't be quite lunch the way that we have it. I mean, I can just tell you, my community, I'm home 1:30 or 2 p.m., and then you have lunch. But in those days, it would be 10 o'clock, so it would be a brunch. And then the truth is, a person wouldn't necessarily eat again until the evening. And so it's the third meal that is the one that's, so to speak, in question. And with us, I would say even more so, because our second meal is usually lunch. So once you've already had lunch, you're now going to have another afternoon meal or another early evening meal before Shabbat is out. And that's what Shulchan Aruch is coming to say that you must indeed do. What if you are feeling quite full? Well, you don't have to have a big meal. You could have a small amount, a kibetza. It's about a slice and a half of standard bread, 60 grams, something like that. So it doesn't have to be a big amount, but it's anything less than that is considered a snack. So it should be a meal, not a snack. If you really can't eat, so then don't eat. In other words, it's just too much. Beg your pardon. If you really can't eat that, it's just too much, so then don't eat. You're not supposed to cause yourself pain, but you should plan ahead and make sure that you don't overeat at the second meal, brunch or lunch, so that you do have enough space to fulfill the third meal. And what the Mishna Brura points out is that if you are really stuffed to the extent that you actually can't eat anything more, then even forcing yourself wouldn't actually help, besides the fact that it's bad for you and whatever else. Even halachically, if a person is really feeling full and he still stuffs himself, that's considered what's called echilat gasa, stuffing, right? Gross eating. That's not considered normal eating. So in such a case, he would not eat, but then he's losing out on this mitzvah basically. And so really you should think ahead, as you say, and not have that extra amount at lunch that would prevent one from eating and enjoying a Sudah Shlishit. The Ramor then says, well, what happens if for whatever reason you missed out on dinner on Friday night? Somebody wasn't well, they overslept, whatever, it could be a variety of reasons. Well, then they still have the obligation to have 3 meals on Shabbat. And so then they should have all those 3 meals on Shabbat day. Next halacha is that the time for Sudah Shlishit is from Mincha time onwards. In other words, 6.5 hours into the day. Normally that'll be about 12:30. Here in Cape Town, it's normally about 1:15. And if you have your meal before then, in other words, you would have a brunch and then a bench and then have a second brunch, early before half an hour after midday. So that does not count as the mitzvah Sudah Shlishit. There are more adds. There are some who say you're not allowed to drink water between Mincha and Mariv. Okay, so this is now a Kabbalistic idea, that the idea is that after a person has left this world, their soul enters a period of judgment for up to 12 months. And during that 12 months, it's even possible soul goes to Gehenna, which is some kind of spiritual purification. However, even the souls in Gehenna get off for Shabbat. You are relieved when Shabbat comes. You come out of Gehenna on Shabbat, and then you enter Gehenna again as Shabbat comes out. And so during this time, towards the end of Shabbat, when the souls are returning to their incarceration during the up to a year of their punishment, so during that time, there is some kind of influence that the soul can have on the water. And therefore, the Ramah is recording this Kabbalistic custom of not drinking the water. He's going to give us a few more details now. So he says that you shouldn't eat Sudah Shlishit, some say, between Mincha and Mariv, because if you eat, you're going to end up drinking, and you shouldn't drink water. You should rather, therefore, have it before Mincha, but others say it's better to first have a Mincha and then have the meal, and our custom is actually to first have a Mincha and then have the meal. However, he says, many others say, he says at least you shouldn't drink water from the rivers, but to drink water at home is fine. and certainly other drinks that are not water is fine. And then some even say that this only applies to a mourner for his or her own father or mother during the 12 months of mourning. And some say that actually this problem is Erev Shabbat, Friday night, not Shabbat afternoon. That's another question. When it says Shabbat around evening time, does it mean Erev Shabbat when the souls are leaving Gehenna, or towards the end of Shabbat when the souls are returning? So he records this Kabbalistic custom, but it's not one about which I would say we are particularly strict or place emphasis upon. Halacha number 3. If your morning meal extends until the time of mincha, so here again, you see they're eating, it's like a brunch from 10 o'clock, because for us, if we're eating lunch at 2 o'clock, so there's no question of extending the meal, until mincha time. You're starting already at mincha time. So but then you're starting before, and you extend to that time. So now it's already 1 o'clock, and you eating your meals. Maybe you started at 11 or 11:30, and you're finishing up at about 1 o'clock. So what you can actually do is you can stop, say Birkat HaMazon, wash your hands, say Hamotzi, and have your third meal. So in theory, if you're having your lunch over that time, what you could do is split your lunch into 2 meals. And this is a good idea, because if you didn't do this, since it's already gone into the afternoon, how are you truly going to eat a third meal? Asked the Shulchan Aruch. How are you truly going to have some kind of appetite for your third meal later on if you have already eaten a meal just within a couple of hours of it? So again, that he encourages us to place even more restraint in our days when we're often starting our second meal at that time and still expecting to have a third meal before Shabbat comes out. The Ramor adds that somebody who knows that he can still have a good lunch and a good dinner. Okay, so have a good lunch and a good Seudah Shlishit. So then have a good lunch. It's not an issue in principle. It's just a practical matter of what is the best way to make sure that you have a nice lunch and a nice Seudah Shlishit. Because again, the idea is that Seudah Shlishit should be a good, respectable meal for Shabbat. It shouldn't just be like a little snack like we often do. And therefore, one should ideally have one's lunch earlier or split the honor of the meal between the lunch and the Seudah. Then he continues. That was the Ramor. Then Rabbi Yosef Karo continues in halacha number 4 that you don't need to make kiddush at Seudah Shlishit, but you do still need 2 loaves of bread. Now, if you still need 2 loaves of bread at Seudah Shlishit, that means that for Shabbat you're going to need a minimum of 4 loaves of bread, because you've got 2 Friday night. One of those you got to eat at least. You got 2 Shabbat day. One of those you got to eat at least, and then you got 2 Seudah Shlishit. So you got 4 loaves altogether, and that's assuming you're only eating one at lunch and at dinner. If you're going to eat both of them at lunch or at dinner, so then you could have up to 6 that you need. And in fact, some say you should have 6 loaves of bread anyway, as 2 new ones for each meal. But that's not an obligation. That's a custom that some have. Okay, so then he says you should have these 2 loaves of bread. And Ramor adds in that if you're having many meals over Shabbat, in other words, even if you're having 4 or 5 meals, which you could imagine somebody would have, so anytime you're going to have a new meal, you need your 2 new loaves of bread. At least, he says you should have 1 loaf of bread at Seudah Shlishit. Even if you can't have 2, you should have 1 loaf of bread. And if you don't even have 1 complete loaf, so you should at least try to have 1 big slice, which is the size of a beitza. In other words, like almost like a size of a slice and a half. So 1 big thick slice that can count. Because then even if you don't have the mitzvah of lechem Mishna, of having this double loaf of bread, at least you have the mitzvah of having the meal, of having the Seudah Shlishit. Okay, and then he says, from here we have a custom that at Seudah Shlishit we are lenient to only use the 1 loaf of bread. That is the widespread practice, says the Ramor. But the truth is, we should be strict, and we should have 2 loaves of bread. That's really the main idea. And the Mishnah Brura says it's a good idea to have wine during this meal as well, to make a borei priagafen. If there isn't a lechem Mishna, if there aren't 2 loaves of bread for everyone, so the one making hamotzi with his 2 loaves of bread should have in mind that he's doing that for everyone. Now, I would say that's probably the more common custom. Is the places where I've been associated is that you'll just have 2 loaves of bread for the meal. Whereas it seems in the times of the Gemara and maybe even much later, when you talked about the 2 loaves of bread, you're talking about 2 rolls. Each person would have 2 little rolls. They wouldn't it wouldn't necessarily be that each person is having the 2 big chalot or kitkas, the 2 big loaves of bread, would just be having 2 rolls. So that's the idea here as well, that either everyone has these 2 rolls, or you have what the Mishnah Brura is describing, or we have, that you have one person making hamotzi of big loaves of bread, but he has in mind that these big loaves of bread are to fulfill the mitzvah of lechem Mishnah for everybody. That's not just his own personal rolls. Then he says so the idea was first prize is you have 2 loaves of bread, but it's quite widespread to only have 1 loaf of bread. The Shulchan Aruch, the Mishnah Brura, explains this custom, that he says on Friday, when they got manna for Friday and for Shabbat, so what you found was that there was for Friday and for Shabbat. And each portion made 2 loaves of manna, so to speak. So they had a portion for Friday and a portion for Shabbat, 2 portions with 2 loaves each, so that's 4 loaves. And now he says you have one Erev Shabbat, one Shabbat day, one Friday night, one Shabbat morning. Beg your pardon, let me start again. You have one on Friday, one on Friday night, one on Shabbat morning, and so you've got one for Suda Shlishit, just 1 loaf left. And that justifies this idea of not final meal of Shabbat in the desert. They themselves would only have had 1 loaf left. So that justifies the common practice of having only 1 loaf for Suda Shlishit, even though, again, first prize is to have 2. Okay, halacha number 5. You need to have Suda Shlishit with bread. Now, it's interesting language here in Rabbi Yosef Karo. I'm going to read it and then we'll analyze a little bit more. You need to make Suda Shlishit with bread. Some say you can do it with anything made from grain, in other words, mizonot. Some say you can do it with things that accompany bread, like meat and fish, but not with fruit. And some say you can even do it with fruit. So he starts off saying you have to do it with bread, but then he says, by the way, there are a number of other opinions. So bread, then there's the opinion even mezonot, then there's the opinion even things, the substantial foods, nutritious foods like meat and fish, and then even fruits, which is like a snack food, food for the taste really more than for the nourishment. You don't see, I'm really hungry, I'm going to have a banana for lunch. So that's the lower level, which some even accept. And he says the first opinion is the primary opinion. You should make it on bread, unless you're really full and you can't make it on bread and you should have it for something else. Or he says if it's impossible, or if it's impossible to eat bread, for example, it's Erev Pesach that falls on Shabbat, that you're now not allowed to eat bread after Mincha. So that whole thing of Erev Pesach that falls on Shabbat, maybe we'll go into that discussion when we come to the laws of Shabbat. But the idea is that you, in such a case, you have the opportunity to, you have to have a Suda Shlishit, but you're not able to do it on bread. So in those cases, we'll rely on these lenient opinions. So he does quote all of the opinions, that there is room for them in the time when you're not able to fulfill the primary opinion, but the primary opinion remains that you should have bread. And all of the other opinions do come in when a person is very full. And again, so first prize is bread, if that's not possible. Second prize is mezonot. That doesn't work. Third prize, other filling food. And if that doesn't work, then fourth prize, even to have some fruit. Halacha number 6, women are obligated in Suda Shlishit. It's an obligation that applies equally to women and men. And the Mishnah Brura explains that, all obligations of Shabbat apply equally to women and men, even though you may think that since Shabbat is a mitzvat asay shehazaman grama, a positive time-bound mitzvah, that it may apply only to men. That isn't the case. It applies equally to men and women. They're also obligated in Suda Shlishit. So that concludes that chapter 291. I think we'll leave it there for this evening. 292 next time. The laws, or in fact, let's do this one quickly. The laws of the Mincha prayer on Shabbat. He says at Mincha, we say Ashrei, Uvaletzion, and Anit Filati. So we say Ashrei like we start with every Mincha. Uvaletzion, this is all from the Ramor, which is normally said in Shacharit. They pushed it off from Shacharit. They delayed it from Shacharit because they said Shacharit on Shabbat is already pretty long. So let's now delay this till Mincha, where we can tighten up the Shacharit Musaf service a little bit, rather do that at Mincha. And then Anit Filati, Hashem, my prayer comes to you at a time of Ratzon, at a time of desire. And that's because the Jewish people on a Shabbos afternoon, instead of going off and getting drunk in the afternoon of the holy day, as many other people do, the Jewish people on the holy day come to shul to listen to the reading of the Torah. So that's considered a special or an auspicious time. And then the Shulchan Aruch says, then we take out the Sefer Torah and we read 3 aliyot, which is a minimum of 10 psukim from the coming parsha. The way we normally do it is we split up Rishon of the coming parsha into 3. Even if Yom Tov falls on Shabbat, we still read the coming Shabbat parsha and not the Yom Tov. Then we say Tzidkatacha, and if we have a day on which we wouldn't have said Tachanun, we wouldn't say Tzidkatacha on that Shabbat. And the Ramah says we don't establish a shiur between Mincha and Ma'ariv. However, we said Pir Kavot in the summer and Shir Hamalot in the winter, but different places have got different customs. And the Mishnah Brura says that despite what the Ramah says, we would actually say a shiur in Shabbos afternoon between Mincha and Ma'ariv, if that would be appropriate, because the main thing is that people are spending their Shabbat time well. We don't give up on a shiur, because of that. So I'll just mention one thing that we have over here about the Tzidkatacha that mentions the Mishnah Brura is because 3 great tzaddikim died on Shabbat afternoon: Yosef, Moshe, and David. And therefore, we have like a little bit of a mourning period for them. And this is something that confuses me somewhat. Why we would have a mourning for the great tzaddikim, even, Moshe, Yosef, and David. I mean, you couldn't ask for 3 greater people. They all passed away at the same time. But it's not like it's their yotzeit. It's not an annual thing. It's not even a monthly thing. We're saying every single week to remember that week on which they died. It seems a little excessive to carry over that sadness of the death of the 3 tzaddikim, that commemoration, to every week. That's a question that I have, but we'll leave it there for tonight, and please God will continue.